I thought rules were for children. Elm Street taught me otherwise. It started with a dare. My friends dared me to spend Halloween night in the old house at the end of Elm Street. Everyone whispered about it, about the vanished kids, the stories of adults who entered and were never seen again. I laughed it off, 17, reckless, convinced nothing could touch me. Halloween was candy, costumes, laughter, cheap thrills. The street was quiet when I left. Fog rolled in from the surrounding fields, curling along cracked sidewalks, brushing my ankles like cold fingers warning me to turn back. The house was there, looming, decayed, sagging under the weight of decades. Windows were dark, some shattered, others glinting faintly in the flicker of old jack-o'-lanterns that someone had left on the porch, though the place had been abandoned for years. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching along the walls of the house, as if they were waiting for me. I approached the door. It groaned when I pushed it open, a sound that set my teeth on edge. The air inside was thick with rot, dust, and a metallic tang I couldn't name. The floorboards creaked under my sneakers. Behind me, the door slammed, echoing through the house. My flashlight flickered. A chill ran down my spine. I told myself it was just the wind, just an old house. I took a few steps inside, scanning the walls with my light. The wallpaper had peeled in long vertical strips, curling like tongues. The furniture was broken, toppled, eaten by time. A staircase led upward into darkness that seemed impossibly deep. Hallways extended beyond what my eyes could see, twisting in impossible angles, as though the architecture itself refused logic. The first few hours were uneventful, but that was the thing about this place. It lulled you into false comfort. I explored each room cautiously. I noticed small details, scratches along door frames, footprints in the dust that didn't match mine, and the faint scent of something sweet and rotten lingering just beyond the light. Every creak of a floorboard sounded amplified. Every whisper of the wind carried meaning I couldn't yet understand. Then I found it, a piece of paper pinned to the wall with a rusty nail. Yellowed, torn, the handwriting jagged. Follow the rules. Break them and leave nothing but shadows. I laughed nervously, probably someone's prank. But a part of me, a deeper, older part, felt the weight of it. Something in the house had noticed me. I felt eyes on me, though I saw no one. I wandered further, flashlight flickering. I saw mirrors covered in grime, reflecting shapes that weren't mine. A shadow moved across the hall behind me, but when I spun, nothing was there. My pulse quickened. I realized then that the house was patient, observant, waiting. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, I couldn't tell. Time felt malleable here. Every door I opened creaked ominously. Every floorboard groaned. The house seemed to breathe, to shift subtly around me. Hallways extended, corners bent, and angles warped. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from upstairs. I froze. It sounded like my name. I told myself it was my imagination, but my heart thudded in my chest. I remembered the paper, follow the rules. I didn't know what the rules were yet, but I knew instinctively that disobedience could be fatal. I explored cautiously, moving room to room, noting every detail. The fireplace had a faint, unnatural warmth, though no fire burned. Cobwebs brushed my face like icy fingers. The air smelled faintly of iron and decay. I tried to map the rooms in my mind, but they seemed to shift when I looked away. Corridors stretching impossibly long, ceilings rising or lowering. Shadows pooling differently each time. At some point I stumbled into a room with a cracked mirror. In it, I thought I saw a face that wasn't mine. A pale grin, eyes wide and dark, watching me. I blinked. It was gone. My heart raced. I forced myself to breathe slowly, careful, measured. The house was learning me, studying me, preparing. I found a staircase leading upward. It groaned under my weight. Every step echoed like a drumbeat. At the top, the hallway extended farther than it should have. Rooms on either side twisted at impossible angles. I turned a corner and glimpsed movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow sliding along the far wall, faster than any human could move. I stepped back, feeling the floor shift subtly beneath me, almost as if the house itself had moved. The air thickened, the shadows pooled at the far end of the hallway. I realized then that the house wasn't just old or abandoned. It was alive. It was patient, eternal, and aware. I didn't know yet what would happen if I broke the rules, only that I could feel consequences waiting in the dark. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow was a message: obey or vanish. And that was when I saw the first sign of the rules. Not the full list, a single etched word into the wood of a railing: never. The word alone was enough. It carried weight, threat, warning. My gut tightened. I could feel the house responding to my presence. I backed away slowly. The hallway seemed to contract, the shadows creeping closer, curling around corners. My flashlight flickered again. I told myself to be calm, to observe, to survive. I didn't yet know all the rules. I didn't know how many there were. But I had learned something fundamental. In this house, Halloween was not a night for fun. It was a test, and I had just entered it. I moved slowly through the hallway, each step deliberate, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The house seemed to respond to my presence. I could feel it shifting subtly beneath my feet, almost like it was breathing. The air was heavy, thick with dust and the faint tang of something metallic. Blood, perhaps, though I told myself it was only decay. A door at the end of the hall creaked open on its own. My heart leapt into my throat. The darkness inside wasn't empty. I could feel it watching me, and I knew instinctively not to enter. I pressed myself against the wall, careful not to make a sound, and inched past it. My flashlight flickered, briefly illuminating a small figure at the far corner of the room. It was gone the instant I blinked. I told myself I was imagining things. The shadows were long, stretching unnaturally, curling along the walls like living fingers. The hallway seemed to extend farther than it should, twisting impossibly, as though the house had grown while I wasn't looking. I stopped to catch my breath, counting silently in my head to stay grounded. The whispers began again, not words at first, just the soft, almost imperceptible brush of sound, like wind through cracks in the walls. Then voices, faint and urgent, calling my name. James, James, they said, though no one was there. My pulse quickened, my palms slick with sweat. I reminded myself to breathe slowly, to observe, to survive. I found a staircase leading downward. It groaned ominously under my weight. The basement was forbidden in my gut, but curiosity pricked at me, gnawing insistently. I forced myself to stop, remembering the single etched word I had seen earlier: never. The air grew colder as I stepped back, and the shadows at the end of the hall seemed to pulse in response to my hesitation. Rooms shifted subtly as I explored. The wallpaper peeled like curling skin, revealing old, faded symbols etched into the plaster. Footprints appeared in the dust, small, thin, childlike, but they didn't match mine. Sometimes they led nowhere, ending abruptly against walls or disappearing into shadows. I began to suspect the house was alive in more ways than I could see, bending reality to its own will. Then I noticed the mirrors. They were everywhere. One in the corner of a bedroom, another leaning against the wall in the hallway. In each, I thought I saw movement behind me. Shadows flickered in ways that made no sense, slithering across the floor or pooling along walls. I forced myself not to look too closely, not to turn my back. Instinct told me that observing too closely could be dangerous. A cold gust brushed my neck. I spun, flashlight raised. Nothing. Yet I felt a presence, a weight pressing at the edges of my mind. The house whispered, soft but insistent. I could almost feel it guiding me, testing me, observing my reactions. My instinct screamed that I was being measured, that any misstep could be fatal. I found a room cluttered with old furniture, broken chairs, tables covered in dust. In the center was a small table with a notebook. The cover was cracked, faded, and scrawled with words I couldn't make out immediately. I picked it up, flipping through pages filled with handwriting that twisted unnaturally, letters curling, words doubling back on themselves. A faint warmth spread from the notebook into my hands. A page caught my attention. Obey, observe, survive. It was simple, yet every letter carried weight. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and shadows pooled in the corners. I felt watched. I realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the house was alive, aware, patient, and it had been waiting for someone like me. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. James, James. They came from everywhere and nowhere. I pressed myself against the wall, forcing my breathing slow, careful. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of cold air, every flicker of the flashlight seemed deliberate, as if the house were speaking a language I didn't yet understand. Hours or maybe minutes passed. Time stretched and folded, disorienting me. I moved through the house cautiously, cataloging every oddity, every whisper, every shadow. The sense of being watched grew. Mirrors reflected hallways that didn't exist. Shadows lingered longer than they should. The walls seemed to shift subtly when I wasn't looking, corridors bending in impossible ways. I began to understand that this wasn't just a house, it was a test, a living entity that demanded obedience, precision, and fear. It measured my reactions, studied my behavior, learned my instincts. I realized then that my survival depended not on courage or strength, but on attention, discipline, and following its unspoken rules. I found another piece of paper pinned to the wall in the hallway. This one had a single word, scrawled in shaky dark ink: watch. A chill spread through me. The house wanted observation, attention to detail. I obeyed instinctively, moving slowly, scanning every shadow, counting every step, listening for every sound. The whispering continued, now accompanied by faint scratching, as if tiny claws were dragging along the walls. I caught a glimpse of movement in a mirror at the end of the hall. A small figure, pale and thin, standing silently behind me. When I spun around, nothing was there. The shadows shifted, and the temperature dropped sharply. My instincts screamed at me to run, to flee, but I remembered the words from the notebook. Obey, observe, survive. I moved on, flashlight tight in my grip, scanning every wall, every corner, every shadow. The house stretched before me, endless corridors twisting in impossible angles, stairs leading to floors that seemed to multiply, doors opening into rooms that shouldn't exist. Every creak, every whisper, every flicker of light reminded me that I was not alone, and that the house had been waiting for someone like me for a very long time. By the time I found a room with a fireplace, I realized something critical. The house wanted more than my presence. It wanted obedience, absolute attention, and adherence to rules I had not yet fully discovered. I felt it in my chest, in my spine, in every shadow that moved in my peripheral vision. I was being tested, and the house was patient. The fireplace room was dim and smelled faintly of burnt paper. The ashes in the grate were gray, cold, but the faintest ember still glowed red at the heart of it, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. I crouched beside it, brushing the ashes gently aside until I saw something beneath them. A metal box scorched and sealed with a rusted latch. I hesitated, then pried it open. Inside were scraps of paper, brittle and yellowed, their edges burned. I unfolded one carefully, squinting to read the words written in faint pencil lines. It wasn't a letter, it was a list, at the top in bold. Jagged handwriting were the words, "Rules for Staying Alive." My breath caught. Below that the rules began, written unevenly as if by a trembling hand. Rule 1, never turn off the lights after dark. Rule 2, never open a door that knocks more than twice. Rule 3, never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. Rule 4, never touch the walls when they breathe. Rule 5, never eat anything offered, not even if it smells like home. I read each one twice, the words sinking into me like ice water. The handwriting trailed off after that, as if whoever wrote them had stopped mid-sentence. The bottom half of the page was charred black. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at those rules. My flashlight flickered weakly, and I felt the walls around me pulse once, slow, rhythmic, like lungs drawing breath. My skin crawled. Rule 4, never touch the walls when they breathe. The air grew colder, and my breath fogged the lens of the flashlight. A faint scraping sound echoed through the room. I turned slowly. On the far wall, the wallpaper fluttered. Then it moved. The surface rippled outward like something alive, expanding and contracting with slow, deliberate breaths. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The house was exhaling. I forced myself not to touch the wall. I whispered the rule aloud, voice trembling. Never touch the walls when they breathe. The motion stopped instantly. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. The house seemed to listen. I stayed still, not daring to breathe too loud. A faint tapping sound broke the silence. Once, twice, then nothing. It came from the hallway. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. The door was closed. My throat tightened. Rule 2. Never open a door that knocks more than twice. I counted under my breath. The tapping didn't repeat. I waited another 30 seconds. Silence. The temptation to open the door gnawed at me. What if it was a draft? What if it was just the wood settling? My hand reached for the knob instinctively, then froze. Somewhere inside me, I felt a warning, subtle but unmistakable, like the house itself was waiting to see if I would obey. I stepped back, slowly. The air grew warmer, almost approving. That was the first time I realized the house rewarded obedience. I found another scrap of paper in the box, half-burned but still legible. It looked like an addition to the rules, or perhaps consequences. If you break one, the house takes something from you. A sound, a memory, a part of your name. A chill crawled down my spine. I folded the papers carefully and slipped them into my jacket pocket. I didn't know how long I'd been inside anymore. The light from outside had faded entirely, and the windows were opaque, like someone had painted over them from the other side. I sat near the fireplace for a moment, trying to gather myself. My flashlight battery indicator blinked red. I checked my phone. Still no signal, no time displayed, just a black screen that reflected my pale, wide-eyed face back at me. For a second, I thought my reflection moved differently than I did. I looked away instantly. Rule 3. Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. I didn't dare test it. A sound broke the silence again. Faint footsteps, coming from the upper floor. Light, deliberate, slow. The boards creaked with each step. I stood still, every nerve in my body screaming to move, to hide. But I had to know what I was dealing with. I crept up the stairs quietly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The second floor was darker, colder. Each door I passed was closed tight. Some had deep scratches near the handles, like something had tried to claw its way out. Others had faint symbols carved above them, circles, triangles, and one marked with a spiral that made my stomach twist just to look at. Halfway down the hall, I saw movement in the mirror hanging opposite me. A shadow shifted behind my reflection, tall, too tall, its limbs thin and sharp, its head tilted slowly, like a curious predator. I froze. My reflection remained still. The figure behind me leaned closer in the glass. I couldn't move. My breathing was shallow. Then the reflection smiled. Not me. It. That smile was wide, wrong, stretching far beyond human proportions. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but the rules echoed in my head. Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. It didn't say anything about moving. I took one slow step back. The reflection's smile widened further. I turned and bolted down the hallway. The mirrors shuddered as I passed them, the air vibrating with a low hum, like the house was angry. I stumbled into another room, slammed the door behind me, and pressed my back against it. My pulse thundered in my ears. The door didn't move. No knocking. Nothing followed. I slid to the floor, trembling, gasping for air. The room was small, filled with dust-covered furniture and broken picture frames. In one frame was a photograph of a family, a man, a woman, 2 children, all smiling stiffly. Their eyes had been scratched out. Something about the man's suit looked familiar. My stomach turned as I realized it was the same suit I was wearing. The walls groaned. A voice whispered from somewhere near my ear, so close it brushed my skin. "You're learning." I jumped, flashlight swinging wildly. The room was empty. The voice came again, softer, coaxing. "Keep the rules, and you'll see her." "See who?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The air shifted, and for the first time, the house laughed. A deep, echoing sound that rattled through the walls, low and mocking, like a throat clearing beneath the floorboards. My flashlight died, a laughter faded, and I realized something terrifying. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry. When I woke, the air was still vibrating faintly, as if the laughter had left a resonance inside the walls. My flashlight was dead, but a faint orange glow seeped under the door. I thought it might be firelight, but when I pushed the door open, the hallway was unburnt. The glow came from lamps hanging along the corridor, flickering with a color that wasn't quite natural. Too deep, too alive. I stepped out cautiously. The lamps illuminated only a few feet in either direction, leaving the ends of the hall swallowed in blackness. There were words scrawled along the wallpaper now, written in that same uneven hand as the rules. The sentences twisted and faded, sometimes breaking apart mid-word. I could only make out fragments. Don't let them. Never after midnight. Keep counting. The floorboards creaked. The temperature shifted from cold to suddenly horribly warm, like breath on the back of my neck. A low whisper slid past my ear. Hungry. I turned fast. Nothing. The hall was empty, but the lamp nearest to me guttered out. The next one flickered, dimmed, and died. Darkness advanced down the hall like a tide rolling forward. I moved backward slowly, until my shoulder brushed a wall. The wallpaper felt hot beneath my palm. Then it pulsed once, twice. Never touch the walls when they breathe. I yanked my hand away, staring as the wall expanded outward like a lung filling with air. A thin crack split down the middle, widening like a mouth. From it came a faint, wet whisper. Stay. I ran. The glow faded behind me. The stairs stretched farther than I remembered, like the house had grown overnight. I tripped down the last few steps and stumbled into the foyer. The door to the outside was gone. In its place was a window showing nothing but swirling fog. The smell of burning paper returned. I followed it back to the fireplace room. The metal box I'd found earlier was gone, replaced by another, larger one. The lid was open. Inside, a single sheet of paper lay folded neatly. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Rule 6. When the house offers new rules, you must read them aloud. Before I could think, the words left my mouth. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it wasn't really mine. The paper burned instantly, turning to ash between my fingers. From the darkness above, something moved. Soft steps pacing along the floorboards of the second story. Slow, careful, heavy. I whispered. I read them. I did what it wanted. The steps stopped. Then from the staircase, a figure descended. It wasn't a shadow this time. It was solid. A woman in a tattered dress, her hair hanging in matted strands, her face pale as wax. Her eyes were open, but empty, the pupils faintly glowing red like dying coals. She paused halfway down the stairs and tilted her head at me. You read them, she whispered. Yes, I said. Her lips stretched into something close to a smile. Then you live. She turned her head slowly, eyes rolling toward the ceiling. For now. And then she vanished. No sound, no motion, just gone. I stood there shivering, too scared to move. Something inside the fireplace hissed softly. I leaned closer and saw faint letters forming in the soot. They rearranged themselves, glowing briefly before fading. I could barely read them before they disappeared. You must keep the rules alive. The message burned itself into my brain. Keep them alive. Did that mean me reading them aloud kept something going? Was the house dying without its rules being spoken? Or was it feeding off the words, off my belief in them? I didn't know. I only knew that every instinct I had screamed to get out, but there was nowhere to go. I wandered deeper into the house. The corridors changed direction when I wasn't looking. Doors that had once opened into rooms now led into other halls, staircases that twisted up and back into the same floor. I began to lose sense of time. Once I passed a clock. Its hands spun in opposite directions, ticking faster and faster, until it stopped entirely. When I turned the next corner, I saw a child. A small boy sitting on the floor, his back to me, humming softly. The tune was slow, tuneless, wrong somehow. His clothes were old-fashioned, corduroy trousers, suspenders, dirt-smudged shirt. Hey, I said softly. He stopped humming but didn't turn around. Are you okay? Do you live here? No answer. I took a cautious step closer. The boy's shoulders jerked once, sharply, as if he'd flinched. It's okay, I said. I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to. He turned around. Half his face was missing. Not blood, not bone, just gone. A smooth emptiness where his features should be, like he'd been erased. He opened his mouth, and a woman's voice came out. You broke a rule. My knees almost gave out. I didn't. You asked a question after midnight. I froze. I hadn't even realized it was midnight. I'd asked if he lived here. He rose slowly, the hum of the house growing louder around him. The air grew heavy, thick with pressure, like standing at the bottom of a deep ocean. I didn't know, I whispered. The boy's voice changed, multiple voices now, echoing in layers. Ignorance is not protection. He stepped closer, and the walls began to breathe again, faster now. The wallpaper bulged outward as if thousands of hands pressed from the inside. Faces formed in the plaster, mouths opening and closing silently. I stumbled backward, tripped over a rug, landed hard on my shoulder. The boy stopped, head cocked, then melted into the darkness, like ink dissolving in water. The hum faded. I stayed on the floor for a long time, shaking, whispering the rules under my breath, trying to keep them straight. There were 6 now, but how many more? How many until the house was satisfied? When I finally stood, I noticed something new carved into the wall beside me. Fresh, jagged lines, still bleeding sap or something darker. Rule 7. Never ask what time it is after dark. My heart dropped. The house wasn't just feeding me the rules anymore. It was making them as I went, and somehow I was helping it. The hallways shifted behind me as I moved. I could feel them rearranging, growing longer, turning corners I knew weren't there before. The shadows pooled thickly, sluggishly, as if the darkness itself was sentient. The house was no longer a static prison. It was alive, expanding, hungry, aware. I tried to stay calm. Every breath was deliberate, every step calculated. I repeated the rules under my breath, counting them carefully, 1 through 7. Never turn off the lights after dark. Never open a door that knocks more than twice. Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. Never touch the walls when they breathe. Never eat anything offered. When the house offers new rules, you must read them aloud. Never ask what time it is after dark. I didn't know if memorizing them was enough, but it was all I had. A faint sound drew my attention. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, pacing behind me. I froze, listening. They stopped when I stopped. I moved forward cautiously. They moved forward too. I swung my flashlight toward the sound. The beam caught a figure in the corner, another child, smaller than the boy before, a little girl in a faded dress, holding something in her hands. "Hello?" I whispered. Her head tilted unnaturally. She didn't respond. The item in her hands glimmered faintly. It was food, bread or something similar. My stomach twisted. Rule 5. Never eat anything offered, not even if it smells like home. I stepped backward instinctively. The girl's lips stretched into a thin, crooked smile. She extended the plate toward me, and the air thickened, pressing against my chest. The house seemed to lean in, attentive, observing. I shook my head, trying to muster courage. I can't take it." Her smile widened. The bread on the plate began to blacken, smoking faintly. The smell hit me, a mixture of burnt sugar, iron, and rot. I gagged. She didn't move, just tilted her head, waiting. I stepped away, muttering the rule aloud. Never eat anything offered, not even if it smells like home. The girl vanished instantly, as if she'd never been there. The walls pulsed, the floorboards groaned. I realized then, the house didn't just punish, it tested. It wanted me to internalize the rules, to obey instinctively, to survive. Every hallucination, every whisper, every shadow was a lesson, and failure was costly. No speech provided. Prosody rate 7%. I continued down the hallway, each step slower than the last. My flashlight flickered, and I thought I saw shapes moving just beyond the light. Figures crouched in corners, watching, waiting. Then I heard it, the faintest giggle. High, airy, not human. It echoed off the walls, seemingly coming from all directions at once. I froze. The giggle turned into whispering, and the whispers formed words I could barely hear. Break it, break it, break it. I shook my head, trying to clear it. The house wanted me to question the rules, to test them. I didn't dare. A room door ahead groaned, opening slightly. A warm, unnatural light spilled out. I felt compelled to look inside, to see what was there, but the rules whispered in my mind. Never open a door that knocks more than twice. I counted. 1, 2, nothing else. I forced myself to stop, breathing shallow. The temptation to ignore it clawed at me. And I realized the stakes were higher than I had imagined. Suddenly, a hand, cold, impossibly cold, touched my shoulder. I spun,
Nothing. But the pressure lingered in my mind, a phantom weight. I stumbled into a room at random, hoping to lose whatever was following me. The room was empty, save for a mirror across from the doorway. I tried not to look, but instinct betrayed me. In the mirror, I saw movement behind my reflection. Shadowy figures, twisted, amorphous, reaching out. The reflection of myself smiled first, an unnatural, slow, cruel grin. My pulse thundered. I stepped back, whispering, "Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first." The figures recoiled instantly. The room felt lighter, the air less oppressive. I realized then that the rules weren't just arbitrary, they had power. Following them didn't just prevent punishment, it shaped reality inside this house. But that realization came too late. A door slammed somewhere behind me. The sound was deafening. The walls vibrated. My knees buckled, and I fell to the floor. From somewhere above, a voice hissed, "You test the rules, and you fail." A shadow surged toward me from the corner of the room. I scrambled backward, colliding with the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder as something grabbed me. The shadow was cold, liquid-like, wrapping around my arm. I screamed, voice raw, and fought to free myself. Then I remembered Rule 6, when the house offers new rules. You must read them aloud. A scrap of paper appeared on the floor beside me, glowing faintly. My trembling hand picked it up. The words were jagged and barely legible. Rule 8. When touched by shadows, name them aloud. They will retreat if named. I swallowed bile. "Shadow," I whispered. My voice shook. "You are Shadow." The grip loosened. The cold withdrew. I scrambled to my feet. The shadow retreated into the corner, dissolving like smoke. My chest heaved. I realized then that failing to speak the rule might have cost me more than my sanity. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself. The rules were growing. They were evolving. Each hallucination, each encounter, added new instructions I had to follow. Obedience was survival. I thought of the children, the vanished adults. They must have broken a rule. I shivered at the thought that the house didn't just punish, it consumed, erased, twisted, and I could feel its hunger pressing against my skin, coaxing me toward failure. I pressed onward, flashlight flickering, shadows crawling along the edges of the light. My legs burned, my mind screamed, but I had to move. I had to obey. The house was patient, but I could feel the tension mounting, the test escalating. And then I heard her voice, soft, melodic, whispering from the darkness. "You learn, you obey, you survive, for now." I knew it was the house speaking through her. The room pulsed, shadows stretching, and for the first time I realized what "for now" meant.
The house didn't just want me alive. It wanted me understanding. Every fear, every hallucination, every rule followed or broken was a lesson, and failure was never an option. I had survived so far, but I could feel the rules closing in, shaping everything, dictating every step, and deep down I knew the worst was yet to come. The night stretched on like a cruel test. Each hour dragged with the sound of whispering static. I lay in the bunk, staring at the ceiling, the flicker of the emergency light pulsing like a dying heart. I kept the list of rules clutched in my hand, fingers cramped around it like a lifeline. Rule 9 haunted me most of all now. If you hear your name whispered 3 times in a row, do not respond. It is not one of us. The first time I heard it, I was half asleep, the syllables of my name slithering through the dark like smoke. "Eli, Eli, Eli." I didn't answer. My throat locked, my chest tight. The whisper came from the corner of the dorm where the light didn't reach. I could feel something there, crouched just outside sight. The moment I moved my hand to cover my mouth, the whisper stopped. I turned my face into the pillow and waited until morning. When I woke, the air was cold enough to burn my lungs. My breath came out in clouds. The old generator hummed faintly below. That meant the power hadn't completely died, but something felt wrong. The others were up already. Ray was sitting at the table, her hair wet, her expression pale and hollow. The rest of the crew avoided her eyes. "What happened?" I asked quietly. No one answered. Then I saw it, her reflection in the window. Her lips moved, but the reflection's mouth didn't match the motion. The reflection smiled a second later than she did. "Ray," I whispered, Did you sleep at all last night?" She looked at me blankly. "I don't think so," she said. I kept hearing someone whispering. Everyone froze. Rule 9 again. We agreed not to speak about it further.
not in daylight. I went to check the radio logs again. The pages were covered in jagged scribbles, times, coordinates, random sequences of numbers that I didn't remember writing. But at 3:17 a.m., there was a note in my handwriting that chilled me. She's not Ray anymore. I must have written it in my sleep, or something had used my hand. By afternoon, the fog outside had thickened into an ocean of white. You couldn't see 5 feet past the window. That's when the radio crackled to life, a dry voice breaking through the static. "Eli, do you copy? This is Dr. Sandor from Station West." I snatched up the mic. "Sandor, we thought you were dead." A pause. Then, "Dead? No, just waiting. You followed the rules, didn't you?" "I'm trying," I said, my throat dry. "Some of them don't make sense." He chuckled. The sound scraped like metal. "Oh, they'll make sense soon enough. But tell me, Eli, have you met yourself yet?" The radio fell silent. That night, I caught Ray standing at the mirror in the hallway. She was whispering to it, her voice rhythmic, almost pleading. Her reflection didn't move. I stepped closer. "Ray, stop." She turned slowly. "It's not my reflection," she said softly. "It's the other me. She's trapped. She says if I help her, we can both leave." Her eyes were black from lack of sleep, or maybe not from sleep at all. "Ray, listen to me." The light flickered once, then twice. When it came back on, Ray was gone. Only her reflection remained, smiling faintly. I ran to the dorm, slamming the door shut. My chest heaved. I grabbed the rule sheet again and stared at the last line, one I hadn't noticed before, like it had been added overnight. Rule 10. If someone vanishes but the reflection remains, do not touch the mirror. Prosody.
Break it and you take their place. My hands trembled. The mirror in the hall was silent now, but I could feel the faint vibration of something behind it. By morning, Ray's bed was empty. Her things were gone. Even her name tag on the locker had been peeled off. The others didn't mention her. Not once. When I said her name, they looked confused, as if they'd never heard of her. That was when I realized the station itself was rewriting reality. The rules weren't just guidance. They were part of a mechanism keeping this place from tearing apart completely. And we were the gears. That evening, I found an envelope taped to the inside of my locker. No name, just a small ink smudge that looked like a handprint. Inside was a folded note. "Eli, there's another list. You need to find it before the next blackout. The first set only covers the surface. The real rules are in the sub-basement. Follow the red light. Don't bring anyone. RR. Ray, I didn't care if it was a trick. I had to know. The stairwell to the sub-basement hadn't been used in years. The first few steps were coated in frost, and the air smelled of copper and rot. I kept my flashlight low. The beam wavered over stains, old tools, fragments of wires that looked half-melted. Halfway down, I heard it. The hum. Not the generator hum. Something lower, resonant, like the vibration of a tuning fork, pressed against bone. My teeth ached from it. Then I saw the red light. It pulsed at the end of the corridor, faint and distant. I followed it carefully, counting my steps. 10, 20, 30. Then the corridor opened into a large, circular chamber, lined with pipes and gauges that didn't match any modern design. At the center, a massive metal door, sealed, but trembling slightly, as if something behind it breathed. The red light came from a panel above it, blinking slowly. There, pinned to the door with a rusted nail, was another piece of paper. I peeled it off and unfolded it. The handwriting was different, sharper, angular. Secondary rules, for those who descend. Do not speak your name aloud. If the red light turns green, close your eyes. Do not record anything beyond this point. When you hear knocking, count to 7 before answering. The voice you trust most will lie to you. I read the rules twice, then folded them carefully into my jacket. That's when I heard the first knock. I froze. It came from the other side of the door. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The door creaked slightly, just enough for air to hiss through. A whisper followed, smooth and wet. "Thank you, Eli. I was waiting." The red light turned green, and I shut my eyes. The sound that came next was not human. It was a mix of static, breath, and the low thrum of something ancient. The floor trembled beneath my boots. My flashlight flickered.
When I opened my eyes, the door was still closed, but the panel above it had changed. Instead of blinking red, it now pulsed faintly in rhythm with my heartbeat. I stumbled backward, trying to make sense of what I had done. The paper in my pocket felt hot, the ink smearing under my fingertips. When I pulled it out, a new line had appeared at the bottom.
Rule 6. You've let it see you. Do not return upstairs. I ran anyway. I didn't stop until I reached the upper level, gasping for air. The others were gone. The dorm, the kitchen, the hallways, all empty. Except for the mirrors, each one now reflected me standing in different poses, one turning, one smiling, one whispering something I couldn't hear. That's when I saw it. My reflection in the nearest mirror lifted its hand after I did. Then it mouthed the words, "Stay." I stood frozen before the mirror, my reflection smiling faintly, mimicking me in ways that were just slightly off. Every instinct screamed to run, but the rules, the countless rules I had learned, held me in place. My breath formed clouds in the cold air, my chest rising and falling erratically, and the house seemed to lean in, listening. I had broken rules before. Rule 9, speaking after the whisper, and almost Rule 5, with the girl's bread. But this, whatever this was, felt different, heavier, older. The mirrors began to ripple. I could see through them now, past the glass, into dark corridors that didn't exist in the house itself. Shadowy figures moved, shifting in impossible ways, bending around corners and disappearing into walls. One of them turned toward me and raised its hand, beckoning. "Do not follow," the rules whispered. But I did. I stepped closer. The reflection's smile stretched wider, unnatural, and for a heartbeat, I felt a tug at my chest, as though the house itself wanted to pull me inside the mirror. My feet froze. My heartbeat thundered. I remembered Rule 10. If someone vanishes but their reflection remains, do not touch the mirror. Break it, and you take their place. I didn't touch it. Instead, I leaned closer, studying the rippling glass. Through it, I could see Ray, trapped inside a corridor lined with mirrors, each reflection warped and trembling. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She mouthed the words, "Help me." I wanted to obey, to rescue her. But the house's rules were clearer now. Obedience came first. I could see what happened to those who broke the rules, disappeared without a trace, their reflections left behind as a warning. My hand hovered over the mirror. Then I stepped back and the surface shimmered, the ripples fading. My reflection remained, smiling faintly. Relief coursed through me, but it was fleeting. The air shifted. The walls groaned, stretching outward and upward. The floorboards vibrated. From the shadows came a low, resonant growl, like metal grinding on bone. Something had been awakened. Something old. Something waiting. I ran toward the stairs. The red light from the sub-basement pulsed in the distance, like a heartbeat. The house wanted me to descend again, to continue the test. I obeyed. The sub-basement smelled worse than ever. Iron, rot, and something metallic that made my tongue tingle. The stairs twisted beneath me, elongating impossibly. When I reached the bottom, I found the door again. The panel above it blinked green. I unfolded the new list of rules from my pocket. 4 secondary rules, but now another had appeared, handwritten across the margins in smudged ink. Rule 6A. If the shadows touch you, name them. Twice. Do not hesitate. I shivered. That first shadow, the one that had grabbed my arm, had nearly taken me. I didn't want to risk it again. Then I heard a whisper. Eli. The name was soft, melodic, drawing me forward. One step, then another. My hand touched the metal door. Cold, solid, trembling slightly, as if it had a pulse. 3 knocks. I counted to 7 before opening it. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow corridor lined with mirrors, the same as Ray's. But this time I could see more. Hundreds of faint reflections, some humanoid, some twisted into forms that shouldn't exist. Their mouths moved silently, whispering the rules over and over. Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, Rule 4, Rule 5, Rule 6, Rule 7, Rule 8, Rule 9, Rule 10. They multiplied in my mind, chanting in rhythm with my heartbeat. I stepped into the corridor. My reflection followed, but it didn't mimic me exactly. It lingered behind, observing, smiling faintly.
The air was thick, almost liquid, pulling at my skin, tugging me into the mirrors themselves. I remembered Rule 6A. The shadows rose from the floorboards, black, shifting, stretching. They coiled around my ankles and wrists, cold as ice, solid yet intangible. Shadow, I whispered. Then again, louder, trembling. Shadow, shadow. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they merged back into the floor. My hands shook, the paper crumpled in my fist. A voice echoed from the darkness, low, commanding. You obeyed, you survived, for now. I forced myself forward, the corridor stretching endlessly. Mirrors formed doorways that led nowhere. Reflections stared from every surface, some of them familiar faces from the station, some smiling, some screaming. I realized that each was a warning, each a lesson. Then I saw her, Ray. Her eyes were wide, terrified. Her reflection reached out for me, mouthing the words, "Break the rules, save me." I froze. I knew the consequence. If I broke a rule, if I touched her reflection, I would take her place. My pulse thumped violently. I weighed obedience against her life. And then the voice whispered, soft and cold, "Choose." The air shifted. The corridor pulsed. Shadows rose again. I could feel the house breathing, hungry, watching, testing. I stepped forward. The moment my hand touched hers, a shock of cold went through me. The mirrors shattered. The sound was deafening, 1,000 shards clattering across the floor. Her face went blank. I screamed, and then I woke. I was back in the dorm, the first light of dawn seeping through the fogged windows. Ray was beside me, alive, blinking. The others were there too, confused but unharmed. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. The list of rules lay on the floor in front of me, smudged, as if it had been rewritten overnight. I counted. 10 primary rules, 4 secondary, and now a new one added in fresh ink. Rule 11, you will forget nothing. You will remember everything. The house remembers. And it waits. I shivered. The rules weren't just instructions. They were living things, expanding, evolving. And I knew with chilling certainty that Elm Street was not done with me. The fog outside lifted slightly, revealing the street. Quiet, empty, normal. But I could feel it watching, always. And the whispers began again, soft, in the back of my mind. Eli, follow the rules. By nightfall, the fog returned thicker than ever. I stayed near the window, the rules clutched in my hand, the paper crumpled and damp with sweat. Every shadow felt like it was stretching toward me. Every sound amplified, as if the house itself had grown ears. I could hear faint whispers echoing down the hallways, overlapping in layers, sometimes my own name, sometimes other voices I didn't recognize. I couldn't move without feeling their gaze on me. I decided to descend to the basement, one final time. The red light pulsed faintly, waiting, and I obeyed. The stairs were endless, bending unnaturally, my muscles burning with each step. When I reached the sub-basement, the metal door stood before me, trembling gently, like a living creature trying to contain its breath. The panel above blinked green, faster than before, almost urgent. I unfolded the list of rules from my pocket, 11 primary and 4 secondary, but now a new line appeared at the bottom in fresh, smeared ink. Rule 12, the final test is for you alone. Fail, and you become a shadow. My pulse hammered. I had survived so far, obeyed so far, but this test felt different.
Every knock, every shadow, every whisper had a pattern. It was deliberate. The house learned from its victims. It adapted. I traced the hall to the library, a place I hadn't dared enter before. Dust hung thick in the air. Shelves leaned, sagging with ancient tomes, ledgers, and notebooks. Most were blank or written in jagged handwriting I couldn't decipher. But one book lay open on the table, as though waiting for me. Its pages detailed the origins of Elm Street, the first dare, the first house. The words were old, older than anything I had ever read. The house had existed long before the street had a name. It had thrived on fear, on obedience. On Halloween, when the veil was thinnest, the house collected new rules, new victims, adding them to the cycle. The first set of rules had been crafted centuries ago by a caretaker, someone who had understood the house's hunger. Each rule was a shield against being erased, a guide to survival. Every dare, every test had been designed to trap the curious, the reckless, the willing. anyone who thought they could beat Elm Street. And when they failed, their obedience was recorded, their spirit absorbed into the system. The house remembered every scream, every whisper, every shadow that had been named. I read on, horrified, as I learned that the reflection I had touched, Ray, was gone forever. Her essence had been absorbed into the house, added to its consciousness. The rules I had followed, the ones I had memorized, were not just instructions for survival. They were now part of me. I could feel them pulsing under my skin, alive. Each time a new victim arrived, I would be their teacher, their guide. Their failures and fears would feed the house, and I would record them, remember them, and live with them. The pages revealed something more disturbing. The house only needed a caretaker every generation, someone who survived the final test. That caretaker became the lens through which Elm Street operated. I had been chosen, not just to survive, but to guide the next, to teach them the rules, to watch, to enforce. I staggered back into the hallway, trying to process the weight of my new role. The mirrors reflected countless eyes, some of them new, others from the past. The whispers were louder now, chanting the rules. Rule after rule, repetition and memory. I realized that even forgetting was impossible. Every step I took, the house recorded. Every heartbeat, every hesitation, every failure or success, it was all observed. The fog outside pressed against the windows, thick and suffocating. I could hear the faintest footfalls approaching from the street. Someone new. A thrill, a dare, the first knock. My hand shook as I clutched the list of rules. They would arrive tonight. They didn't know the rules yet, and I had to teach them. I approached the front door. Through the fog, I saw a figure moving cautiously, holding a flashlight, eyes wide with fear and anticipation. I recognized the look, the same expression Ray had worn the first night. The blood in my veins ran cold. I had become what I feared. I was Elm Street's voice now, its enforcer, its keeper of rules. The first knock came. 3 deliberate raps. I opened the door and greeted the new victim with a calm I did not feel. The rules were ready in my mind. The lessons I had learned in terror, in hallucinations, in fear, were now my responsibility. I recited them aloud. Never turn off the lights after dark. Never open a door that knocks more than twice. Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. Never touch the walls when they breathe. Never eat anything offered. When the house offers new rules, you must read them aloud. Never ask what time it is after dark. If you hear your name whispered 3 times, do not answer. Name the shadows if they touch you. Do not touch the mirrors of those who vanished. The figure froze, listening. Their face pale, their eyes wide. They had no idea the gravity of what they were facing. I could feel the house stirring behind me, ready to test them, hungry to see if they would obey. And then, as the fog closed in around the newcomer, I understood fully. Elm Street was eternal. The dares, the rules, the cycles, they would continue endlessly. Each generation, each night, each Halloween. And I would live it, remember it, enforce it. I glanced back at the mirrors in the hallway. My own reflection stared at me. It smiled faintly, but not entirely. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted subtly. They were watching, recording, remembering, and I was their messenger, bound to them, a guardian of the rules I had once feared. The first victim stepped inside. The door closed behind them. The fog swallowed the street. The whispers began anew. Elm Street had chosen its next, and I would make sure they learned the rules. The new victim trembled, eyes darting around the foyer, as I recited the rules again, slowly, deliberately, so each one sank deep into their mind. The fog pressed against the windows, thick and suffocating, curling into the corners of the room like living smoke. Outside, the street was empty, silent, but I could feel the weight of Elm Street pressing in from every angle. The house pulsed, alive, hungry, as if it had waited centuries for this moment. I led the newcomer into the hallway. Mirrors lined every wall, reflections of them stretching infinitely. Some faces warped, some blank, some twisted in fear. Shadows slid along the floor, touching the edges of their shoes, and I watched closely as they whispered the words I had taught them. Rule after rule. Every hesitation, every mistake was noted. The house was listening, recording. We descended to the sub-basement. The red light pulsed at the end of the corridor, steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of Elm Street itself. My new charge's hands shook, their steps uncertain. I remembered how I had felt the first time. The fear, the confusion, the endless tension. And now I was the one guiding them. "Do not speak your name aloud," I reminded them. "When the red light turns green, close your eyes. Do not record anything. Count to 7 before answering a knock. The voice you trust most will lie to you. Name the shadows if they touch you, and never touch a mirror of someone who has vanished." Their eyes widened as they nodded, shivering. They had no idea what would come next. The first knock came. 3 deliberate raps. My pulse thumped in rhythm with the red light as I waited. The shadows along the walls twitched, eager to see if the rules would be obeyed. I watched as the newcomer counted slowly, deliberately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The door creaked, opening just enough to reveal the darkness beyond. A whisper slithered into the corridor. Soft, sweet, familiar. My name and theirs, mingling in the same breath. Their hand trembled, hovering in midair. I did not intervene. They obeyed. They lived. The red light blinked green. They closed their eyes. The house groaned. Shadows receded. For a moment, silence reigned, and I understood fully what it meant to survive. I turned away from them, my reflection staring at me from the nearest mirror. The smile was faint, subtle, but there, not entirely human. I could feel Elm Street pulsing through me now, a living, breathing entity that had fused with my memory, my fear, my obedience. I was no longer just a survivor. I was its messenger, its guardian, its keeper. The first knock outside had begun again. Someone new, drawn by dares, by curiosity, by foolish courage. I listened as the wind rustled through the trees. The street was empty, but it would not remain so for long. The cycle would repeat, the rules would continue, and I would teach them. The mirrors reflected me, the shadows shifted around me, the fog pressed against the windows. And through it all, the whispers began once more. "Eli, follow the rules, remember, survive." I turned to the hallway, facing the next victim with calm and certainty. My voice was steady now. I recited the rules again, for them, for me, for Elm Street itself. Never turn off the lights after dark. Never open a door that knocks more than twice. Never speak to the reflection if it smiles first. Never touch the walls when they breathe. Never eat anything offered. When the house offers new rules, you must read them aloud. Never ask what time it is after dark. If you hear your name whispered 3 times, do not answer. Name the shadows if they touch you. Do not touch the mirrors of those who vanished. Remember everything. Obey. Survive. Outside, the fog swirled thicker, the street empty yet alive. The knocking came again, deliberate, insistent. I smiled faintly. Not for me, but for Elm Street. Patient, eternal, watching. The house waited, and I would never leave. The rules were mine now, and Elm Street would never forget me.